Shalom, everyone. Today we'll finish the topic of implements or instruments that are used in the house or outside the house, and maybe we'll go into the final one about the ground. So, uh, some items are sturdily assembled initially, but loosen over time. If people are used to using these items in their loosened state, it is not prohibited to assemble or disassemble them. As noted, assembling implements loosely is not considered boneh. Furthermore, since people are used to using them this way, we are not concerned that they will end up fixing them with nails or glue. And so we're not talking about things that are connected to the walls or to cabinets, but rather just like we talked about yesterday about strollers and playpens and stuff like that. And so these are some practical examples, and the second one I think is a little bit difficult for me to understand. So, thus, if a wheel falls off a baby's crib and people are comfortable using the crib after replacing the wheel loosely, it may be replaced because it's just for balance, and it's even if it falls off again, you can still put it back. Similarly, rubber chair tips and table tips may be replaced if they are only loosely attached. So, if you remember in Halacha 6, we said that we're not allowed to put rubber chair tips and table tips. I think you all know what I'm talking about. They're the metal chairs and tables that have at the bottom of them a rubber insert. So apparently the difference between this halacha where it says it is permitted and the one previously that said it wasn't was that one was talking about the initial setting up. So if you bought a brand new table or chair set, and in the package was all these rubber tips to add to it, or if you used felt stickers, they sell them at Home Depot and stuff like that. So the initial putting on of these rubber tips and felt is not allowed. But if they're now loosened over years and they just fall and you can loosely put them back on, that is permitted. And I'm not sure why Rabbi Melamed didn't point out that it sounds like it contradicts the previous halacha in this same chapter. But maybe that goes back to what we said yesterday, that we have to be very careful in understanding halacha and the different tiny little details that might be a difference between Chilul Shabbat and keeping Shabbat. So apparently, if they are loose and they fell off, then you're allowed to put them back on loosely, but not to tighten. And this is also the case if a leg of a child's doll has come off. Um, Not that a child's doll is considered a implement that we can use for our own use, but just because it looks like building. If the leg is attached to the doll tightly, it may not be snapped back into place, but if it is connected loosely, it may be replaced. Um, We'll leave it at that. If a temple, which apparently is the word for one of the handles of a pair of seeing eye glasses, if a temple fell off a pair of glasses, it may not be screwed back into place, since generally it is screwed on tightly. But again, it got loose over the years, or every time that you uh, fold it back into the case, it sometimes gets even more loose. So one may not even attach it loosely because one may forget and tighten it, thus transgressing a Torah prohibition. However, if the screw is lost, there is no longer a concern that anyone will tighten it. Thus, one may reattach the temple using a safety pin, as this is a weak attachment that is permitted for implements. I always found that a safety pin doesn't really work, but duct tape does. And again, duct tape would be allowed because it's definitely temporary, and people would maybe even think that it's silly that you look like that, but to be able to see on Shabbat, if that's what you need, then that's how it's done. And instead of the handle of the glasses, if a lens fell out of the glasses frame and replacing it requires screwing it back in, it may not be replaced at all, even if the screw is left loose. This is because we are concerned that later on one will forget and tighten it. But if there is no screw, but rather the frame has expanded a bit so that the lens sometimes falls out. Then the lens may be replaced in the frame. Sometimes they have nowadays a tiny little, very thin rubber, a rubber band that is around it, and so it gets loose, and you just put it back in, and it fits. That would be like a pill bottle that you're allowed to open and close and stuff like that. Um, we are not concerned. So we are not concerned that will permanently reattach it, as that would require expertise. One may not straighten a spoon, knife, or glasses temple on Shabbat by hand, because this is the normal makeh patish, the normal way of doing it. The prohibition of boneh does not apply to compressing a spring or a toy car so that the car will move forward. One may do so as long as the car does not make noise or lights up, because that means that there's batteries. So if it's only on a spring, you are. And since this isn't really our topic, but it also works on a spring. If you have one of those old watches that have to be wound, and there's no battery, so if it hasn't stopped, you're allowed to wind it. But if it has stopped, you're not allowed to wind it, because that will be starting it again. And also, you will have to correct the time. So while it's still running and the time is still correct, even if it's looser, then you are allowed to wind, but not if it stopped. One may inflate an air mattress, which for me is very, very surprising. An air pillow or rubber ball that had been previously inflated. Since this is permissible, it may be done in the usual fashion using a manual pump. The reason it's so surprising for me is because that's one of the things that they said about riding a bicycle on Shabbat, that you might have a flat. So apparently the difference is that if it's a cut, then yes, you will have to also fix it with glue, and that's permanent. But if it's just to add air, apparently that is allowed. So, however, one may not inflate these items for the first time on Shabbat, because many poskim maintain that inflating them for the first time makes them the utensil into a viable implement for the first time, which is prohibited. And one may not blow up a balloon, even if it had been previously inflated, lest one tie a knot at the bottom, which would be go back to kosher or matir, not boneh, which is also forbidden because it's permanent. However, if the balloon is sealed with a valve instead of a knot, and it had previously been inflated, it may be inflated on Shabbat. So again, very many details, and ask your rabbi before doing anything. And there are some people who say, when in doubt, don't. I don't think that that's the right approach, but we can review these halachot again and again to make sure that we know that these tiny, minute differences between what is allowed and what isn't. And we'll stop here. And tomorrow we'll finish with the boneh by learning how to clean the floor on Shabbat.